So when you look, and I look at Luke chapter 15, there's realistically only one parable taught three different times within that particular chapter. The parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and the one that you and I will focus in on this evening, this morning, the parable of the lost son. It begins in verse 11, and let's read that for just a moment. Verse 11 begins by saying, "A certain man had two sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divideth unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, took his journey to a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country. And the citizen sent him into the fields to feed swine, and he would have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise, will go to my father, say to my father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose, came to his father, but when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, had compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand, put shoes on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and be merry, for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. Now the older son was in the field. When he came, drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing, and called one of the servants, and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And now he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came out his father, and entreated him, and said unto him, or he said, answering, said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgress I at any time thy commandments. Yet thou never gavest to me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Now, when you and I look at Jesus and his teachings, one of the very common ways Jesus would teach while he was on this earth is something known as parable. So parable is an interesting word because it's not translated. It's transliterated. What they did is they assigned some English-sounding letters to some Greek letters, and they just sort of said, all right, this is the new word. It comes from a word in the Greek called parabole, which doesn't make much sense to us. And really, the definition doesn't make much sense until you start to dissect that definition. The word really means to lay down beside. How many of you ladies have ever went to Walmart or Hobby Lobby and then went and got you some fabric and then got you one of those little pouches from McCall's, and you put all that thing together and you pin them all together and you cut out that pattern and you sew whatever together? Anybody ever did that, or is that just me? All right. Then you understand. You probably understand better than most when you put that pattern down as you're laying it down. The thing you're going to do is cut out those pieces that would make that garment, right? You are laying it down beside, you're laying the pattern down beside the fabric. Here, when Jesus teaches in parables, he's going to lay down the truth of God beside an everyday event that these people would have known, would have dealt with, to where they can say, I see what he's saying now. I get that. That makes perfect sense. And so he begins with this parable, and he speaks about two boys and their father. And this parable, at least in my estimation, really deals with choices. The younger son makes choices. The older son makes choices. And interestingly enough, the father makes choices. Now let's start with the younger son, since that's where Jesus started in verse 11. There's a man who has two sons, which would not be uncommon. Maybe two, maybe that would be uncommon. He may have had more, but here's a man who has some sons, and here's the younger son. The younger son says to the father, choice number one, give me what I deserve. You see what he's saying there in verse number 12? Give me the portion of goods that fall to me. Well, let's change that a little bit to 2024 in the great state of Alabama. Dad, I wish you were dead, where I could get what I want. Is that right? How many of you had mothers or fathers pass from this life into eternity? When did you get that inheritance? That's what he's asking for. He's saying, Dad, I don't see you as any other thing other than a source of income for me. And what a terrible idea this younger son is thinking. All I see you as is a source of money for me. Now, there's a choice about to be made by the father. Does he do it? Does he not? Does he give this son exactly what he wants? He does, because he understands the principle by which my mother lived for such a long time. Give him enough rope and he'll. I've had plenty of rope. How about you? Yeah, so he divides those things, both with the younger and the older. Once that division happens, it happens. Now, we're going to come back to this particular division in a moment when we talk about that older son. But notice first at least how the division happens in the Jewish family as you and I look at this. Because there are two boys, then the inheritance is going to be divided in thirds, which seems counterintuitive to how we do it, right? You get half, right? There's two, right? Well, then where's the other third go? The other third goes to the older son. He gets what's known as a double portion. So he gets 2/3. That younger son gets 1/3. Now here's the decision by the younger son. So as this is divided, he's given, let's suppose there are 99 sheep, because I can do that 3 math real easy in my head with 99. So he gets 33 sheep, right? Please somebody shake or nod. Miss Brandy would shake or nod. So he gets 33 sheep, which means this younger son ain't going to walk across the country with 33 sheep in tow, is he? He's going to spend the next few days turning this amount of animals and stock and this thing and another into cold, hard, liquid cash. Something he can put in his pocket. Have no ties at home. And just walk away. So he does. He turns that into cash, and he walks away, and he goes, choice number next, into a foreign country where nobody knows him, which is not going to be a good choice. You ever wanted to go somewhere where nobody knew who you were? You ever wanted to go somewhere where nobody knew who you were so you could do whatever you wanted to do? This is his choice. This is the decision-making skills that he has. I want to go live exactly how I want to live, and I don't want anybody to tell me or to tell my family or to have word get back to Dad, so I'm just going to go off into some country I don't know. I'm going to live it up. Decision number next. I'm going to have a wonderful time. I'm going to do whatever I want to. And the Bible will tell us that he wasted his money with riotous living. What does that mean? That means living like a knucklehead. That's what it means. Doing whatever he wants to do, however he wants to do it, with no regulations, with no stopping. And his own worst enemy is the guy with the checkbook. This younger son, he continues to make bad decision after bad decision, doesn't he? Now, how many of you who have gray in your beard or in your hair remember that guy when you were growing up who made bad decision after bad decision? Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I don't know about you, sometimes at my house, he rears his ugly head again. Am I the only one there? Sometimes you make that bad decision and you look and you say, it's the stupidest thing I could have done. What in the world am I thinking about? He doesn't have the amount of money that would let him live forever doing anything he wants to do. He has a limited amount of money. I know what that feels like too. And eventually, that checkbook simply runs out. There's no more money. There's no way to get home. There are no friends to help him. There's nowhere he can crash on somebody's couch. He's going to have to get that dreaded three-letter word, isn't he? He's going to have to get a job. Boom, boom, boom. And because he's in a foreign country, as we see the citizen that he begins to speak to and the job that he gets, what we can deduce from that foreign country is that it's not a Jewish country. Finds a kindly old man or a middle-aged man there in the country, and he says, I need a job. And the citizen says, good, because I need somebody to slop the hogs. There was a guy who went to school with us at Memphis who has a master's degree in hogs. Interestingly, I didn't know you could get a master's degree in hogs, but apparently you can. He preaches on the side as he works for some company, and they work on genetically altering the pig so that it has more lean meat and less fat without losing the flavor. Now, however that's done, I don't know. Now, I know I can smoke a piece of pork. I don't know how to raise one like that. I've seen his operation. It's fantastic. They stink. We were up there in Flora, Illinois, preaching a gospel meeting probably 10 years ago. And he said, do y'all want to come out and see what's going on? We said, sure. Took all the girls. Every girl in my house, I think, washed their hair that day 5 or 6 times, and it took that same regiment 3 days to get that smell out of their hair. Hogs stink. That's not a deterrent for this boy. Why? Because he's broke. He has nowhere to go. He has nothing to look at, no prospects anywhere. He's got to eat. He's got to have somewhere to sleep. So in order to do that, he's got to have a job. So he takes this job, feeding pigs, which for us, we may have a pig here or there on our little family farm and place that we live on, but it's just a pig. Nobody cares about that. You just go out there and throw whatever out there. We don't think about it much. Pigs are just kind of, they've been there, right? They've kind of been around the whole time. Let's see if you can put this into perspective. So you have a kid who decides to leave home, and he's going to go to L.A. and make it big. And he gets out there, what he finds out is L.A. is expensive, and he sort of runs out of money after a while, and he's going to have to take a job. Well, he looks through the want ads and finds a job that actually hires him, and he is responsible for taking out the trash. He said, that's not too bad. In an abortion clinic. You see that little look on your face right there? So when Jesus says he's feeding the swine, all the Jews who are around listening to this parable have that same face. That's something that they don't do. You don't do that. The swine's an unclean animal. We don't put ourselves in that situation. He did. That's where he finds himself. When you look at the choices of this younger son, you see some terrible choices. So much so that he puts himself finally in a place he thought he'd never be, doing a job he thought he'd never do, having his mouth water over a bunch of food he never thought it would water over. And then you come to verse number 17. It's probably my most favorite verse probably in the New Testament. And here's how it begins. And when he came to himself. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a reckoning happening here with this boy, and first, himself knowing what he's supposed to do, and with truth. How many times have you been in that hog pen only to come to yourself? How many times have you looked at your life and said, that's the dumbest thing I could have done. I'm going to have to fix that. I'm going to have to change something. And I'm tired, sick and tired of being sick and tired. Something's got to change. This is where he is. Something's going to have to change. And listen, write this down. If you have notes or you write in your Bible, write this down. If he doesn't change, nothing else will change. The father, does he still love him? Yes. Is he still that father's son? Yes. But the father's not going to come get him. He left. He's going to have to come back, and he's going to have to change to fit the mold of the son of that father. He can't just stay where he is and expect the father to say everything's okay. And so his next choice is, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I can't stay here. I won't stay here. At least if I am a servant in my father's house, at least I won't starve to death. The question he asks to himself is this: how many servants in my father's house have bread enough and to spare? But me, I'm starving to death. He finally starts making good decisions. Finally. So he gets up, dusts himself off, walks out of that particular hog pen, and then goes back to the father, back toward his house. Good. He's starting to make good decisions. Leave him right there for a minute on that road. Do we want to go to the father next, since he's next in line, or you want to go to the older son? Let's go to the father next. The father divides the inheritance. But you know what's going to happen. You know when you divide that with this kid, what's going to happen. Yeah, but sometimes you can't avoid it. Anybody ever learned the lesson the hard way? That's just me too, okay. Anybody ever go to the school of hard knocks? Yeah, Do you remember that lesson more? We're not quick to forget that one, are we? Maybe losing money for this young boy isn't nearly as bad as we think it is. Maybe he needs to learn a lesson that's going to carry him not only through this life, but into eternity. He divides the inheritance. Notice this next decision, the father never stops him. Just lets him go. I would, if I were a betting man, I'd lay everything down on the fact the father knew what was going to happen. Why let him go? Why let him go? Once again, I think it is lessons to be learned. Now, let's look at this from the father's perspective. That ain't real easy, is it? When you know they're about to mess up and they're going to have to mess up to learn. It's not real easy, is it? You wish you could stop them like you used to when they were 4 or 5 and say, don't do that. Go this way. Sometimes you can't. So when we pick him back up in the parable, we see a man who has lost half his children. He doesn't know where his younger son is. And we find a man who, in my mind at least, I see him on the top of the house there in the area of Israel during that time. We think we invented this thing called outdoor space, where your house just flows to the outside. They had it before we had it. They had a roof that was somewhat flat. It allowed it to drain water, but this would be their porch area. I can see him after the day's work is over, going there, looking as hard as he can toward the north for a while, and then looking as far as he can to the east and the west for a while, and then to the south. He's searching. Every day he goes up there, and every day he's looking for the boy. And for most days, he doesn't get it. And I would assume most days he walks down off of that porch a little more sad and a little more disappointed than when he walked up there. But then there is that one day, as he's looking, and he says, Is that a person? That is a person. That's a man. No, wait a minute. I know that gate. That person is my son. Now, what do you think he's thinking on that day? So, about a year and a half ago, I had a privilege to go to Israel. Unbelievable. You need to go see it if you haven't seen it. It's an unbelievable place. Men even today, Israeli men even today, we do not run. Their head could be on fire. We do not run. But we'll just burn up right here. We do not run. What in the world's wrong with you? But here, this father looks out there, and then, as history would tell us, he gathers up this long robe, this long flowing robe, and begins to tuck it into his belt to where it would make his clothes very similar to our basketball shorts. You know why? He needs to run. He sees that one. He has compassion on him. He runs out to him, falls on his neck, kisses him. What does that mean? He grabs that boy up and embraces him and kisses him. Yep. Smelling like a hog, stinking to high heaven, probably dirty, grimy, but that's his son. And that's a decision that he makes. His next decision's odd, at least to me. Bring out a robe and put it on him. Are we not going to bathe this boy first? We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Change his clothes. Make him look like something. Why? Because he's a member of my house. Put a ring on his finger. Interestingly, the idea of that ring being put back on his finger, even before the father says anything, accepts him right back into the house. Gives him that same authority that would be wrapped around that ring. He's part of that house again. Put shoes on his feet. You know what the difference between rich people in Jesus' day and poor people in Jesus' day was? Shoes. How many shoes you have at your house? Just one? Not one pair, just one shoe? Bunch of pairs? Mm-hmm. This boy didn't have any shoes. Put some shoes on his feet. Put a ring on his finger. Put that robe on his body. Why? Because this was my son who was dead. Now, is that a true statement? Be careful. The answer is no. Well, sort of. The answer is yes, then. Well, sort of. Was he dead? Literally? No, because he's here. To the Father? The Father didn't know where he was. The Father didn't even know if he was still alive. So the Father, when he says here, for this my son who was dead, is giving us a glimpse into the way he thought about this son. He thought he was dead. What's he going to do? Is he ever going to come back? Is he ever going to change? Will he ever come back around? You know, the son tried to apologize. Another decision the father made was he got enough apology from the son to sort of fix the problem. Father was never going to make the son a servant. Father was never going to make the son have the same salary as a servant. Here you have some bread, here you go. Father wants to know, did the younger son learn anything? Did you change? Did you figure it out yet? Did life all over you while you were out there? Oh, yeah. So you have the younger son make choices. You have the older, or the father who made choices, and then you had the older brother who made choices. Go back again to the division of the stuff. When all that was divided, when the younger son is deciding, I'm going to change all of my inheritance into liquid cash, what did the older son do? Well, we're not told, are we? I can tell you this, by the end of this particular parable, I know what he did. He stayed there. Somebody's going to have to run this farm. Somebody's going to have to be in charge of this. Somebody's going to have to keep up the way of living, and so the older brother stays. Decision number one is he's going to get mad for no reason. So when he comes back from the field that day, I can only assume smelling like he's worked in the field all day. In my mind, he's down by the wash house, taking off his dirty boots and dirty clothes and trying to kind of get clean before he goes into the house. He hears something that changes his outlook and mindset on what's going on inside this house. Maybe as he comes up, he thinks it's just a regular day. You know, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to get something to eat, I'm going to try to pass out and wake up and do it all over again in the morning. It's just a Tuesday. But he hears something that sounds like people having a good time and enjoying themselves and rejoicing. And as he listens a little bit harder, he hears music playing, which seemingly to all of those things can't be anything else other than a party. To which he says, all right, what are we having a party for? Calls that servant over to him and says, what's going on? And in a dumb stroke of luck, the servant answers and says, your brother's back. Doom, doom, doom. To which the older son immediately flips the switch to be angry. I don't want him back. Well, did you want him dead? I don't want him to come back. I want him to have wasted everything. I want him now to be in a bind. I want him now to be hurt. And I want him to suffer the way I've had to. Notice the discussion between the father and this older brother. The father goes out to him. And the older brother says, all these many years I've served you and never transgressed your law. Parents, how many of you believe that? You know why I don't believe that? Because I got kids. Are you telling me you've done every single thing I've ever asked you to never have to be corrected? Come on. Are you kidding me? If you think that, I've got a great investment opportunity for you. I'd like to talk to you about some land I have out in Arizona. Beachfronts, great stuff. The older son is trying his best to paint the absolute best picture he can about how he has been serving the Father, even if it's not exactly true. And the father's no dummy. He hadn't been walking around with his eyes closed. He's seen what's been going on. He knows exactly what the boy's been doing. The older brother says this, and not only have I been the only one here doing what you've asked because nobody else will do it. I'm the best son you have. He says, this kid has taken your money and spent it with harlots. Now, you go back a little bit in that parable and you tell me how Jesus said he spent that money. The younger son spent his money in riotous living. What does that mean? Not good stuff? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the older brother ain't telling on himself a little bit. You know what I would have done if I had that money to spend? As soon as your sons come back, though, we killed the fatted calf. An interesting idea, the fatted calf. He stuck around somewhere between 12 and 18 months from birth to death. In a Jewish household, they would have put him in the back corner of the back stall of wherever they would call their barn. In a little tiny pen. This little, so he can't move any direction. keeps them tender. The only opportunity this cow has to make it past 18 months is if Jesus returns and the earth stops spinning. Other than that, this cow will die. He will feed the family, and generally we kept him for a special occasion. So then the next year-ish, we're going to have a special occasion. If it's 14 months after this one dies, well, then it won't be as special as it would have been 4 months later, but here we go. Everybody in the house knew about this cow. And they knew it was put back. So every now and again, Miss Brandy will get a wild hair, and she will make a homemade cheesecake. And if you're acting right, she'll put some caramel on top of it. And I think I can eat a cheesecake and a half before I have to take a deep breath. Do you imagine her making that cheesecake and saying, okay, don't touch it? Now I'd have to look at her and say, I hope you made 2, because that ain't going to happen. And here is, for lack of better terms, their cheesecake. Don't touch it. This is for a special event. And now when he says, go get that cow, well, something has changed. The brother knows something has changed, and he says, look, you're giving this kid who's taken all of your money and spent it however he spent it, you've given him the prized possession of this farm, and you wouldn't even give me a goat. Go back in your mind to the inheritance day. I know we keep jumping back there, but they keep taking us back there. Wouldn't even give me a goat. The father retorts to that statement by saying, all that I have is yours. So go back to that day of division. So the younger son gets that third, and then he turns into liquid cash and goes off. Forget about him. Here's the guy with 2/3. 2/3 of what? Well, 2/3 of the money. Out of the whole pile, yes. 2/3 of the animals? Yes. 2/3 of everything? Yes. But see if you can locate it in your mind this way. This kid takes his third and moves on. Now, this 2/3 that's left here is everything that's left. Everything. Who owns that? The older brother. The father doesn't own it anymore. The father has divided it, and now it belongs to this older brother. Everything. You didn't even give me a kid. It's all yours. All of it's yours. You can do whatever you want to. You could have come yesterday and killed this calf. It's yours. It's all yours. After the division, it's just yours. But he doesn't look at it that way. I want you to do this for me. I've done that for you whenever the division day was. It's all yours. It's nobody else's. It's just yours. And then the father says to him, not only was it necessary, it was the right thing. It's the right thing to bring your brother back into the house. It's the right thing to be happy that he's alive and well and that we can take care of him and we can get him back to where he's supposed to be. Now, does that touch any of your stuff? No, it doesn't. The division's already happened. He's thrown his away. It doesn't touch any of your stuff. This is all still yours. And he's still your brother. What are you going to do? Go back, if you will. What time does this class end? Top of the hour? That sounds great, right? Quarter till. All right, if somebody rings a bell, that doesn't count for just a moment. When Luke chapter 15 begins, he's talking to two groups of people. Notice verse number 1 and 2. Then drew near to him all the publicans and sinners for to hear him, and the Pharisees and scribes murmured and said, What man receiveth sinners and eateth with them? Now this is the audience to which he's speaking these parables. I want you to get a better look at this audience real quick. And this will be the last one. It's right here. Read it with me. Then drew near to him all the younger brothers to hear him. And the elder brothers murmured and said, This man receiveth sinners and eateth with them. Now, do you understand the parable? He's trying to teach a group of people here who are divided. That they ought not be divided, but they all ought to be in the family, in the house of the Father. One more decision from the Father. Did you notice that when the younger son was coming up, the father ran out of the house to meet him? Did you notice that when the older son came up, the father went out of the house to meet him? Neither one of them were in that house of protection. And they both needed the Father. What can I learn from that particular parable? Man, I wish we had another hour. We could really get into it, but the clock tells me it's time to quit. I appreciate your time and your attention.